All right, you're going to want to hear this. We're about to break down an absolutely incredible story of how one entrepreneur went from being on the absolute brink of total failure to building a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. Seriously, it's a masterclass, not just in business strategy, but in mindset. Just look at that number. Let it sink in. $5 billion. And we're not talking about some pie-in-the-sky valuation here. Nope, that's the actual annual sales volume from Philip Cantrell's brokerage, Benchmark Realty. So, the big question is, how on earth did they get there?
And that's really what this is all about. How does a company go from the edge of just disappearing to that level of success? Well, as you're about to see, the answer is a wild ride involving a massive crisis, a radical pivot, and a really powerful shift in thinking.
To really get this comeback, we have to start at rock bottom. And for this story, we've got to go back to 2008, a year that just crushed businesses and brought Philip Cantrell's company right to its knees. What's just crazy is how fast it all fell apart. I mean, look at this. Early 2008, everything's fine, business as usual. Then, bam, the mortgage crisis hits the whole market like a tidal wave. But the real gut punch for Cantrell, that was when his single largest client straight up poached over half his agents, 7 out of his 13. In just a few months, his business was staring at total annihilation.
Cantrell put it perfectly himself. He said he was, and I quote, staring at the abyss. Wow. I mean, you can just feel the weight of that, can't you? Everything he'd built was about to just vanish. He had a choice to make. And that choice, that's where the real story begins.
But you know what they say, right? Sometimes a crisis is exactly what forces you to innovate. Instead of giving up, Cantrell used that pressure, that feeling of being at the edge of the abyss, to forge a completely new path. He didn't just tweak his business, he reinvented the whole thing from the ground up. So, here's the big move. That old traditional 80-20 commission split, gone. He switched to a totally different fee-based model. Why? Well, it was designed to be a magnet for the best, most experienced agents out there. See, the focus shifted from what's in it for the brokerage to what's in it for the agent. And that was the key to building something that could scale like crazy. Okay, so a new business model was great and all, but that was only half the battle. That's the what. The how? Well, that came from a profound change in his entire philosophy. Because let's be real, the best strategy in the world doesn't mean a thing if you can't execute it when the pressure's on.
And this is where we get to the real secret sauce. The engine that drove this whole comeback. It wasn't some fancy spreadsheet or business plan. It was a disciplined mental framework, a kind of operating system for his brain that let him navigate total chaos and make clear strategic decisions. He calls it the power in the pause, and it's such a simple but brilliant idea. Think about it. Something happens, that's the stimulus, and then you react, that's your response. But he says there's this tiny little space between those two things, and in that space lies your power to choose. Most of us just react on autopilot, right? But the magic is learning to find and use that pause. So here's how it plays out in the real world. Step 1, the stimulus. A challenge pops up. Maybe your biggest client poaches your team. Ouch. The normal knee-jerk reaction? Panic, anger, freak-out mode. But step 2 is the pause. You stop, you breathe, you create that space to think. And then comes step 3, your response. But now it's not a reaction. It's a chosen strategic action. So simple, but so powerful. And you have to understand, for a guy who calls himself 98% left brain, this was not some fluffy, abstract idea. No way. He turned it into a system. This disciplined way of thinking became the foundation, the blueprint, for how he systematized everything else in his business, from compliance to onboarding. It was literally the operating system for his comeback. Okay, so we've got the new business model. We've got the powerful new philosophy. So, did it work? Well, this is where it all comes together. And yeah, it leads us right back to that jaw-dropping number we started with. It all came down to this one guiding principle, inspired by Earl Nightingale. Money is the scoreboard of your service to others. Think about that. He completely stopped chasing money directly. Instead, he became obsessed with one thing, providing exceptional service to his agents. The philosophy was simple. If you serve your people, financial success is just the natural result. Money becomes the scoreboard, not the game itself. And man, what a scoreboard it became. The result of that intense focus on service was a business that grew to 2,000 agents, generating $5 billion in annual sales. This chart right here, that's not just growth, that's the direct outcome of prioritizing service over everything else. It's incredible.
And the journey from the abyss came full circle in 2020. Cantrell achieved the ultimate successful exit, selling Benchmark to United Real Estate Group. I mean, talk about validation. It was the final proof that his radical pivot and disciplined philosophy had absolutely worked. So what are the key takeaways from the sale itself? He gave some really solid, no-nonsense advice. First, be ready for intense due diligence. He calls it being stripped down naked. So your systems and your financials have to be perfectly clean. Next, find partners who are good at the things you aren't. Systematize absolutely everything you possibly can. And finally, maintain a tough but fair code of ethics. His rule was simple. You muck up, you're out. And that brings us back to the main point of this whole story. It isn't just about real estate or business models, it's about that critical moment of choice. So, the question I'll leave you with is this. In your own life, in your own work, when the next challenge arises, what will you choose to do in that pause?